is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? All right, here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're delighted you're here. Broadcasting live from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains, Studio A. Information's on the website. Alex is producing the broadcast, the worldwide broadcast, at the world headquarters of Genesis Communications Network. Today we're going to talk with Mike Parsons. Mike Parsons has run for office, and we're going to talk about what happened when he ran for office in his home state of Tennessee. You've heard him call into USAPrepares.com as Mike from Tennessee. Mike has risen to become an instructor at USAPrepares.com. And you may also. So if you have something that you think is what we should hear, and you're knowledgeable about it, and you're passionate about it, send me an email. Vincent@USAPrepares.com. We're going to talk about what happens when a person runs for office. I ran for office. I ran for school board director. I was defeated. I received only 1/8 of the votes. Nobody knew who I was. But the rally to keep the status quo was unbelievable. The superintendent of schools marshaled all the forces that she could to keep the existing board of directors, because they knew that if I got in there, I'd fire her. I would make it a nonstop mission to fire her for the extravagance, the waste of money, the lack of performance of the school's networked computers, the lack of books for the students to take home for homework. And I wanted the students to be educated, which was her job. To stop me, they marshaled the forces to prevent me from being elected as a representative of the people. Today we're going to discuss what happened to Mike Parsons. He ran at a higher level, and he experienced pretty harsh results. You can hear about that. I suggest you keep your dial tuned to USA Prepares for the next 2 hours. You will not believe what happened to Mike Parsons. And then we're going to talk about operating a vehicle without a driver's license and asserting your rights if you choose to do so. And one of our instructors, Craig Douglas, does that all the time. Spends a lot of time in court, but he chooses to do so. And he always, always wins. He's the radiation detection guy. You saw him at the Get Prepared Expo. You've seen it at all of our expos. He's been on the air, and he's been at the meetups. So today, Mike Parsons ran for office. Welcome, Mike.
Good morning, Vincent.
Good morning, Mike. You know, you really did pay a high price for running for office to try to take back your county in Tennessee. You know, being a patriot has its price. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, a lot of them paid a very, very high price. And they got targeted by the system. And that's what's happening to us. So, Mike, why don't we start with, you want to start with that? You want to start with running for office? Why you wanted to run for office?
We can, and first let me comment by saying that this is the first time I will have spoken of this issue, these backstory issues, if you will, ever on radio since this whole ordeal began back in 2001, and that seems odd since I have the ability to call into so many shows, and I actually had my own radio show for about 2 years. But during that time when I had that show, I was barred from speaking about my own personal issues on my own show where I paid for the airtime. But that was the deal. That was the only way they would let me on. I could talk about anything else, but they did not want this story to get out. So this will be the first time ever on any radio station that I have spoken of this at any length at all. So
here it goes.
Okay.
So, Mike, let's start with why would anyone want to run for office in a community? Why did you do that?
Well, I don't seek power. I don't seek position or fame. I could care less about that. I was fed up with the corruption. The bottom line is that I was under attack for doing my everyday things. My family was being attacked. Other people in the community minding their own business were being attacked. And systematically, a corrupt backwoods mafia was destroying our community. No businesses could move to the area. There were no good jobs. Anybody that worked in the county was limited to working for the government, which were the highest paying jobs, or agriculture, or a few $8 and $10 an hour jobs. That was it, and that's the way they wanted it. It was a closed shop. We're talking about backwoods mafia 101 tactics. What you see going on in Washington, they have perfected to an art in the county in which I now reside. But that being said, if you do nothing, nothing ever changes. And, well, I decided to engage the system on my website. And if people want to go there, it's mikeparsons.org. Now, let me explain something to you. When you go to it, it's not going to make a lot of sense. You're going to see one section that says, you know, here's the story about his incarceration. Here's the story about him running for office. Here's part of his radio show with some bits and pieces of some shows that are archived. But it doesn't really make any sense. And part of that is because I've just recently reacquired access to the website just about a week ago. And so it's been sitting idle since virtually November 23rd, 2009, the day I was convicted. And so what I would like to try to do is give the backstory, what led up to this. And in my platform, I'll just start with that, and I'll let you know what the platform is. And this will kind of give you a real clue as to why they did not want me in that office. I was going to impose a moratorium on eminent domain immediately. Now, some of the things that the county executive, that's the same as the county mayor that I ran for, it's the top job, you have a certain amount of oversight over every county department, including the zoning department, roads, and land acquisitions. I was going to put an immediate moratorium on eminent domain to prevent the county from implementing smart growth or Agenda 21. I couldn't really call it Agenda 21. They called it smart growth, so I had to use their verbiage because they would glaze over and tune out if I tried to explain it. You really don't have that much time with most people. They don't understand, and so now that people are awake and understand it, it's known. But back in 2008 when I ran, 2006. The election was in 2006. But at that time, I was aware of it, and the things that I was going to implement would eliminate Agenda 21 immediately in the county that I was at. Professional standards. I would go through every department and demand that everybody be professional to the citizens, and that if they are being complained on, that I would review those complaints, and those people would either straighten up and treat people with dignity, or they would be gone, because there's too many cases of people that have been basically ignored. They would be hung up on, they would be denied access to the government services because they're not one of the good old boy. They're not on that ladder system of, upward mobility within that structure. I was also going to do something that no one could stand, and that was an audit of every county government office. I'd been speaking with the county comptroller, and I had the last 20 years audits where he had cited fraud and basically theft straight out of the county executive's office from the sheriff's department, equipment that was never reported stolen that had been stolen. There was no accounting for this. $60,000 here, $40,000 here. Money that was taken right out of different budgets, they didn't have a clue as to where it went. Well, I was going to do an audit and demand that the Attorney General prosecute. We were going to clean house. Also, I was going to make the area more conducive to industries. I had Toyota looking at bringing their truck plant to this area. Former manager of Federal Express, I have contacts in different industries. One of those was Toyota, and I was able to speak with one of their higher-up individuals that's over the placement of their facilities, and they were looking very seriously at moving the plant, which would have brought 5,000 jobs to the community, averaging $40,000 a year. In a community where the average wage is less than $30,000 a year, and virtually everybody else has to leave the county to find employment, that would bring jobs, growth. People could go to school, get a job, retire, do all these things, hire good attorneys if they need to go up against the old boy network corrupt system, whatever. And I was going to institute term limits. I was going to eliminate retirement for elected officials so that it's a service. You go in, you serve your 1 or 2 terms, you go in and do something else. Let somebody else get in there and drive the train for a while. They could not stand that, and because of that, they had to shut me down. If you go to the website, you're going to see on one of the pages there is it's actually the home page. If you look at the bottom, you will see a photograph that shows, it's a screenshot from a local TV station the night of the election. It says Tipton County Executive. These are election results at 9:47 that night, and I would be the one on top, Parsons, with 79% of the vote, 4,282 votes, and my opponent, with 21% of the vote, had right at 1,142 votes. This is with the early returns coming from the county seat where he had the most support. He'd been in office for 20 years. I'm a guy that's just got a bunch of good ideas. I'm not a political panderer. I'll talk to anybody. I've even got a 3-foot-long ponytail. I'm Native American. I don't look like a politician, but I know the issues, and I can certainly articulate a point to people that have a concern about problems in the community. I can let them know what I would do in the direction I would try to take the county. That night, I was contacted at midnight
Mike, hold on.
by an employee working there.
Mike, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We're going into a break. Mike Parsons, he's going to tell us about what happened when he ran for office. USAPrepares.com. I'm Vin Finelli. We'll be right back. Mike, we're talking about you were running for office, and you were going to put a moratorium on eminent domain. And right here in Missouri down the road from us is Baker Creek Seed. And I was at a Industrial Development Authority meeting years ago, and Baker Creek wanted to widen the road, and they wanted to pave the road because maybe several miles down off the main paved road is their farm. And they have an event annually, and it brings lots of people and lots of dust, and there's a traffic jam, so they wanted to straighten out the road. And so I was at this meeting, and they were talking about it, and the county approved about $46,000 to do a study and figure out where they were going to steal people's property in order to straighten out the road, because you cannot straighten out a road without stealing farm property in the county where I live. So I was absolutely outraged that Baker Creek was willing to let their neighbors' farms be stolen, or parts of their farms, to straighten out the road so people would have a quicker and easier path to Baker Creek farm, Baker Creek Seed, because that's where they happen to be. The point is, if Baker Creek wants people to come to an event, then they should have property that is accessible to those people rather than allow or encourage the county to steal their property through eminent domain. So if you're ever wondering why Baker Creek Seed is not invited to the Get Prepared Expo, now you know. And if you ever wonder why Baker Creek is not invited to be on this broadcast, now you know. Mike, please continue.
Yeah, that's part and parcel of that old boy network of corruption. And if you're not on the ladder, you don't get to engage the system or play the game. But the problem with that ladder system that they keep forgetting is that if someone just above them on the next rung up comes up against them, they lose every time. Now, yes, they can defeat a person at a lower rung on the ladder. The system supports itself of corruption. They see who is in the positions of power, and they will instinctively support that corrupt system or that corrupt person because that's the way they operate. They operate in this pack mentality of hierarchy, and that is the height of tyranny and corruption. In my case, I didn't really answer your question. Why did I run? When we bought our property, we had a few problems. When we're moving out here, one night my wife called that one of our females, our alpha female, dug out from underneath her area where she was, kept. We put up fences and everything to keep our wolf hybrids in so that we didn't have to worry about them, wandering off and anybody doing anything to them. And the female got out, and as my wife is following her across our fields, she crosses into the tree line, shadow, and my wife, who's maybe 40 yards behind her, this is right at sundown, hears a barrage of gunfire, and it's the guy that lives behind us shooting at our dog, and on the fourth or fifth round, she heard Shadow yell out. She was hit. And my wife called me, and I came home as fast as I could. Within an hour, I was 50 miles away, driving over. And I went to investigate. It was dark then, it was raining then, and I couldn't find anything. And I called the neighbor's number. I wasn't able to get anybody to answer the phone. And the next day we went out, and the guy's putting up electric fence around his chicken coop and around his backyard area. And I asked him, and he said, well, no, we saw a coyote. I said, well, where was the coyote at? Oh, it's 10 feet away from me. I said, sir, coyotes will not get within 10 feet of you. That was my dog. What did you do with her? I know that you shot her. My wife heard you. I'd called the police the night before, the sheriff's department. They never responded. I did file a report. They never did anything. I tried to encourage this guy because I knew if we're going to be neighbors, we've got to be able to communicate. And I invited him and his wife over. I said, come over, let me show you my animals, my pets, my family. These are family members. This is not livestock. You need to come see our family so that you know when you see them, you don't shoot at them. And as they were walking away, his wife said, you should have told them, which clearly is an indication to me he did it.
Mike Parsons, one of your family was shot by a neighbor, your wolf hybrid. We'll be right back. Michael Parsons is with us, and Mike's from Tennessee, Tipton County. He heard the shot. He heard his dog cry out. He heard his neighbor's wife say, you should have told him. Mike, what happened to the dog? Was the dog shot? Did they kill the dog? Did you ever see the dog again? What happened?
We never saw her again. They would never admit to anything, and ultimately the sheriff's department refused to do anything whatsoever. And then I took the guy to court, tried to hold him responsible financially, and more insult to injury, the judge just dismissed it, didn't care about it, appealed it, and went on up the system. And they just totally ignore the law. They just don't care unless you've got multiple eyewitnesses and videotapes. The fact that my wife observed this person shooting at our dog, even though it was dark and she could see the figure, she couldn't say, yes, I could see his face, but it was on his property, and he had testified he was the only one there, and that he said he saw a coyote, and he said he shot off into the distance to scare a coyote that was 10 feet away. All this stuff, circumstantial as it is, it shows that there is a likelihood that the guy's lying. He's the only one there at the time. He's the shooter. The dog's gone. nowhere there. My wife heard the dog yell out. So it supports the claim that we had. Fast forward 1 year. Now we've got a lot more fenced-in area. Our dogs, our wolves, have a lot more area to run around and play. We've got latches. We've got a very nice, secure area. Come home to find out that one of the gates has been opened. The lock has been removed. 4 of our wolf hybrids are out. My alpha male and 3 girls that... when you lose your alphas, the alpha in a wolf pack, they control everything. When you have an alpha pair, they self-regulate. You don't have to worry about indiscriminate breeding like you do in domestic dogs. So only the alpha pair will breed, and only when they know that they can breed and provide for them, when there's food and so forth. So we never had to worry about overpopulation. Well, as soon as the alpha female is gone, boom, all these females want to become the new alpha, so everybody's in season. So we had a bumper crop that following year. Needless to say, someone came and opened the gate, and while we're out looking, the guy behind us, along with his buddy, shot one of our wolf hybrids, Brandy, a 1-year-old female, with a 7mm Magnum and 2 .45 caliber rounds. She was standing 6 feet away from them. I won't show you the photos unless you really want, Vincent, but needless to say, a 65-pound wolf hybrid can be split in half by a 7mm Magnum round. The neighbor heard the shot, another neighbor. As I drove by, he told me about it. I went to investigate. They denied everything, and I called the police, the sheriff's department. They showed up. They said, well, just wait over there. Well, these were the buddies of the guys that are killing my dogs. And they came up with a plan. They devised a way that they could entrap me. So they refused to let me go get my dog. The guy that shot her, well, they both shot her, picked her up out of the ditch where they had thrown her to hide her. They admitted they wanted to hide her because, quote, they did not want a confrontation. There's no livestock that they're protecting. It's not even their property. They're on somebody else's property killing my dog. They picked her up and made sure I was watching. They're about maybe 100 yards away, and they threw her down on the back of the four-wheeler, and I can see her broken body spraying everywhere. They came up in front of me, and as he sat on his four-wheeler, he pulled up in front and said, get out of the way. I said, no, I'm going to take her and put her in my truck. You've done enough damage. He went forward abruptly and ran into my leg and knocked me off balance, and then he raised forward in front of me. And with every ounce of energy I had, I punched him right in his nose, knocked him back over his four-wheeler, broke his nose. And, of course, the cops grabbed me, and instead of just, as I wasn't resisting, handcuffing me if that's what they wanted, they proceeded to drag me about 40 yards over to a gravel driveway, knock me down, and put their boot on the back of my neck and say, eat the gravel, as the other officer, who's probably about 300 pounds, very well built, steroid type, proceeded to do the full Nelson and try to break my arms out of socket. And, yeah, this is the way things happen in a backwoods mafia community. When you call for help, you call the people that are paid to help you to stop crime, they perpetrate crime. They devise a plan in which a way to trap you. Now, did I have to swing at him? No, but when the guy runs into me with a four-wheeler and cuts my leg and raises up at me as if he's fixing to attack, that's the only thing I can think of, and I'm unarmed, and all I can do is defend myself as best I can. But I was charged, and ultimately the grand jury dismissed the charge. Then that same day, my alpha male, who was out, he never returned. And that was a big part of my life with him. He was a very important part of our family. 2 days later, when I was released, I came home and was trying to find out how someone could have got on the property and opened the gate and removed the lock. And so we put all new locks on and did a lot of things. Got a call from the animal control. Animal control is regulated by the county executive. And this fellow calls and he says, well, Mr. Parsons, we need to come out there and look at your wolf hybrids and see if you got any wolves out there. And I said, well, sir, you wouldn't know how to tell the difference between a full-blooded wolf and a wolf hybrid because they virtually look the same. His response, oh, yeah, we have to cut their heads off and measure their brains. So this backwoods bumpkin, 80 IQ moron is telling me he's wanting me to let him on my property to kill all of my pets, my family, in order to satisfy his curiosity if we have wolves. And I said, if you come on my property, you're looking for trouble, you're going to get it. If you want a Ruby Ridge, bring it on. I was pissed. Well, they never showed up. I called the county attorney, and I said, look, what are you guys trying to do, start a war? I said, you know I'm Cherokee. You know I have a right to have these animals. I've had them forever. Leave me alone. My animals have harmed no one. And they backed off. There was a case where on the backside of our property, it's a large piece of property, it's a farm. I was doing some work, and along the gravel road, a fella blocked the road, started pointing guns at me and the workers that were with me. We called the sheriff's department. This entire county has maybe 6 squad cars. There were 6 squad cars that showed up. Everybody, they emptied the offices, everybody showed up. They took the guy's gun, and then they told me to leave my property. And as I'm explaining to them, this is my property, I have a right to be here, this fellow's brother shows up and points a gun at me and is fixing to shoot me. They finally stopped him, but they refused to arrest him. I went to the courthouse, and the judge told me that I needed to forget everything, that if I was to charge this guy, that they would also charge me with criminal trespass. Being on my own property is criminal trespass. And as he put it, Mr. Parsons, these jails are dangerous places, and, you know, I can't guarantee your safety. You go in today, you might come out on Monday, you might not. So you need to think about that. So this judge is basically, through extortion and intimidation tactics, threatening me that I would be arrested if I press charges against his buddies. Now, this is a judge. It's well known locally that he's been arrested and spent time in the federal lockup himself for being found with large quantities of white powdery substance that it currently is a crime to own. And this is what they have running the county. They have drug heads and criminals. And so this was my motivation. There were several other incidences where we were threatened, and we decided, you know, we're going to fight. We're not going to run. We're not going to sell out. We're not going to give up our dream. We're going to stand and fight, and we're going to do it through the system. And I found the only solution was to eliminate the source of control and power, which was the county executive. And to look at all the different things, when I started peeling back that onion, I saw layer after layer after layer of just blatant corruption. And I realized, hey, I can get in here and do some things that will improve not only my life, but the lives of everybody else in the county. And it's really not that difficult, folks. It's really not. It doesn't take a certain level of sophistication to be able to be a county executive. If you can do basic math, and if you have common sense and decency and value your rights and those of your neighbors, you'd be an excellent candidate for county executive. And so I ran. And the night of the election, I got a call from one of the volunteers saying, congratulations, Mike. You beat him in a landslide. You've got over 10,000 votes. He's got less than 2,000 votes, and they're trying to figure out what happened because they didn't see it coming. The next day, the local radio station said that the guy I ran against, the incumbent, that he won in a landslide, that he had the 10,000 votes, that I had less than 2,000 votes. And I called him and said, wait a minute. The local news station said the election returns from the election office showed I had 4,282 votes, but I had the 78% of the vote at early returns, and that it was my opponent who had right at 1,000. Oh, we don't know anything about that. These were official election returns being faxed to the TV station that they were broadcasting. Consequently, though, it was the only information that they sent that night. And because they were using the microvote smart card or microvote voting machines, electronic voting, I discovered that the person counting the votes turns out to be the manager of the Election Commission office. No big deal, right? Do you know who appoints the manager of the Election Commission office? The county executive. So the person that I was running against was the person who appointed the person counting the votes. I realized after talking to Microvote, it was a very simple process to change the votes, that they could literally go in there and just pull it up and change it, print it out, and call that the official return. So I challenged the election. I filed a proper lawsuit on my own, had absolutely no help. Couldn't find anybody in any party or any political arena that wanted to help clean up the corrupt voting system.
Mike Parsons, this is a sobering story. USAPrepares.com is where you're learning the truth. We'll be right back. Class, some of you may be thinking, what does this story that Mike Parsons is describing have to do with preparing? We need to understand how the system works, because if you do, you can prepare. If you don't know how the system works, you won't know what to prepare for. You know that we're preparing for natural and man-made events. Well, the man-made events include corruption at the town, county, state, and federal levels. And that's what we're talking about. A lot of people, including me, believe that our votes are manipulated. I believe that they may not even count. I believe that it may even be a charade. And here's what you're learning right now. You're learning that the vote was flipped. You're learning that the person that lost the election, the incumbent, was put right back in his seat as if he won the election. And all of the effort and the money and the support and the votes to elect Mike Parsons were overthrown. Didn't count. They were wasted. Mike, please continue.
I didn't even mention the fact that many of my campaign signs that I bought were removed by county officials, taken to the landfill, taken off of private property, that people who had them in their property properly positioned were threatened by county officials, that I paid a ton of money having a mail-out done to every household in the county, and half of those were thrown in the trash by the post offices, where I went by and observed trays and trays of my flyers days after they were to be delivered, laying on the floor, and then later observed them in the dumpster. And when I called the person over the post office, the inspector, to come out, they conveniently waited several days, and then they had excuse after excuse as to why they couldn't do anything about it. So it goes deep and wide. While I'm challenging this in the court properly, I cited multiple cases of election fraud. A person who was on the ballot, a circuit court judge, stood in position as a chancery judge and dismissed my case. And I even had subpoenaed the smart cards, tabulating machines, and all the devices needed to determine if they had flipped the votes. He denied my subpoena. Now, this is a guy who's on the ballot, and I'm seeking to void the entire election. And in the event that I am successful, he would have had to have run for office again, potentially. And therefore, he had a financial interest. I appealed that. They didn't care. While I'm in the process of appealing this through the appellate courts of the state of Tennessee, the rubber stamp system as it is, a guy that lives down the road from me, who's a close personal friend of the guy I ran against for office, is cutting his grass, as he says. He said that he saw some of my wolf dogs on my property. He finished cutting the grass. He then went and put his lawnmower up, got his gun, walked to where he was at on someone else's property cutting grass, began shooting into the, quote, uninhabited wooded area across the street. That's the front of my property, where my animals were and my wife was. I'm yelling at this guy. I cross over out of the wooded area onto my neighbor's property where it's open, and I'm yelling at this guy to stop shooting. He proceeds to cross the street to get a better shot and continue shooting. He's got a Ruger 1022 with a 30-round clip. I'm yelling at the guy. It's 6 o'clock, September 27th, 2007. Broad daylight. I'm wearing a white T-shirt. I'm easily seen. I'm yelling at the guy. He looks at me and continues shooting at my dogs. And Brandy, one of my wolf hybrids, who's about maybe 50 yards away from him, about 40 feet in front of my wife, who's standing in the tree line, hears my voice, and she begins running towards me. And you'll see a photo of her on my website, mikeparsons.org. But Brandy is running towards me, and this guy is shooting at her as she's running. The bullets are flying past my wife. They're flying past Brandy, and then they're flying past me. Well, I've had a weapons permit for many years. I was actually a special deputy for a time.
Mike, this is a cliffhanger. We're going to have to continue this on the other side. We're going into top of the hour break class. You want to know what happened? I certainly do. Mike was shot at, so was his wife. We'll be right back after the top of the hour news. This is USAPrepares.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Your dial's set correctly to USAPrepares.com. You know, you hear me talk about being cocked and locked, and I am. And if you've listened to hour number 1 of USA Prepares today, you know why. You're learning what it's like living on a farm. Mike Parsons with us, and he's describing what happened to him and his wife and his family, his wolf hybrids, when they were shot at. Mike, it's very sobering. You can tell by the tone of my voice. This is extremely sobering, and this is the continuation of the first hour. So, class, here's what I'd like to request that you do. Those of you who have the ability to post on YouTube, would you please post this, hour number 1 and hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com on YouTube. And the reason I'm asking you to do it is we're learning that elections can be overturned fraudulently. We're learning that the sheriff's offices may or may not respond to your calls for help. We're learning that the corruption is at the local level, as well as the county level, as well as the state level, as well as the federal level. You're hearing it right here, live. This information needs to be shared with everyone in the country, because you cannot prepare unless you understand how the system works. The system is broken. The system is corrupt. I've seen it here in the county where I live. Mike Parsons, let's continue. You were shot at, your wife was shot at, your dogs were shot at.
And let me add one quick thing. I went through all the proper legal channels. I sought out help from the sheriff in the county and was denied. I went through the courts for seeking help and was denied. I went to the news media, every station in the vicinity, seeking attention to this, to get people to bring this to the attention so that government would be forced to deal with this corruption and these attacks. One station actually sent a reporter out. Her name was Allison Treyarcy. She was a reporter. I don't know where she is now, because 2 weeks after she came out with the cameraman and did the story, and talked about one of these issues, she was no longer with the station. And I contacted the station. They said, well, we're not going to run that. We're doing other things. In a county where there might be one murder a year, it's very little or low crime reported that you hear of. And I brought to their attention numerous situations that I had video and audio of, and, of course, personal eyewitness testimony. None of this was brought to light. They would not talk about it. It got no airtime.
Mike, let me interject for just a second. I did an investigative report with a investigative reporter out of Richmond, Virginia, many years ago. His name is Richard Rial. He did an expose showing the corruption within the automobile insurance company. And he was fired. He was fired for exposing the corruption within the automobile insurance company. Mike, one other thing. You had mentioned that the county took down your signs. And when I lived in Virginia, they wanted, the town government wanted to put a prison in our town. So I and some neighbors built a sign, a 4x8 sheet of plywood, painted it highway yellow and highway black, and I put it on the edge of our property, and it said, proposed prison, next right, meaning you take the next right exit, that's where the proposed prison would be. Within hours, the county took down my sign. The county highway department took down my sign. And I found out about it. And they apologized, and they said, actually, I was within my rights to do that. They had no right to do it. And the sign went back up. And we defeated the proposed prison in our town. So, Mike, what I'm saying is you're not alone. I've never said these things before on the air, the two things that I just mentioned. So please continue.
Well, when this fellow was shooting at my wife and my dog and then me, I witnessed all of this. I observed every bit of this. And I'm yelling at this guy at the top of my lungs to stop shooting. As I've mentioned to you before on this show and another program, that I love life, and I value life greatly. And I do not seek to take or end life unnecessarily. I was locked and loaded. I had my Glock 17 on my side, very capable of shooting it. The guy was 100 yards away. And as my dog's running to me, Brandy, she was hit 3 times, and she fell at my feet. And my focus goes from him to her. And I held her as she fell at my feet, and she's looking up at me as if to say, Dad, I was just coming home. She had just been swimming in the pond, and she was harming no one on our property. And then after he started shooting from across the road, it scared her onto the next-door neighbor's property which he didn't have any right to be on, nor did he own. He crossed the street and began shooting again, and the bullets were flying past me. And I walked down. My girl died in my arms in seconds. And I got up and I walked down. My intent is to enact a citizen's arrest, to stop this guy, to have him arrested. And I had a little digital recorder around my neck. Like I mentioned before, inspect homes, and I've always carried this digital recorder so that I can take notes, because it's faster to talk than to write underneath a house or inside of a commercial building up on top of a scaffold. So I turned it on, and I've got the recording still, and I played it at the trial, and you could hear me clearly say, drop your gun, you're under arrest, put your gun down. Then I said, because I didn't see it, where's your gun? Turn around, where's your gun? Repeatedly, I'm informing him to disarm himself, that he's under arrest, and the law recognizes the citizen's right, it's a common law right, to make an arrest. The police are corporate officers. They work for corporations. The city and the state are corporations. They exercise arrest powers through the citizen's right of arrest. They're engaged in common law arrest practices that power that they have is a right for we the people. So there's no special privileges. It's a right. And so I learned this as a sheriff and in studying the laws, not as a sheriff, but as a special deputy with the sheriff's department many years before they ever started the weapons permit process in Tennessee. But the guy refused to submit. He had thrown his rifle, I later observed, in the back of his truck that was near him. Now, he was basically approaching me, and I told him to stay back, don't come any closer. And I confiscated the rifle. And we never got within 30 feet of each other. And listening to the recording, you can hear the distance on the audio. You can tell when a person moves away from a microphone and gets closer. And this type of digital audio recorder, it can pick up sounds for quite a distance. And you can clearly hear him moving closer and me telling him to stay back. And I confiscate the rifle, and he takes off. And I confiscate the rifle. I pick up Brandy, and I go back to my property and call my wife, and I'm telling her that, be expecting the sheriff's department, because as I'm telling him, he's under arrest, his buddy is calling 911 and saying, well, I'm calling 911. And I say, yeah, tell him Mike Parsons is enacting a citizen's arrest, that you have violated the law. And this was a fellow that was there with him that appeared, I don't know to the degree that he was an accomplice, but he was certainly instructing this guy that was shooting by pointing and directing him to hide his rifle. That would be an accomplice. This guy testified that he shot 29 times and that the 30th round jammed, or he would have shot a 30th round. And when questioned, were you afraid while you were cutting the grass and you saw the wolf hybrids? No. Were you afraid when you stopped cutting the grass? No. Were you afraid when you were in your house getting your rifle? No. Were you afraid when you were walking out? No. Were you afraid when you started shooting from across the road onto my property at my dogs? No. Were you afraid when you crossed the street? No. Were you afraid when you were shooting at my dog? No. When my dog was running towards me, were you afraid? No. At no time was this guy afraid for himself or anyone. I was charged with aggravated assault. When the sheriff's deputy showed up, I presented them the rifle. I said, I want this fellow arrested. This is what he did. They got on the phone. This is a Sunday evening. Instead of calling the sheriff, an investigator, whatever you might do to find out what they should do, they called the judge who was on the ballot of the election that I'm challenging. The judge who would ultimately tell them, well, go ahead and arrest Parsons. Well, he's the victim. Well, that's okay, arrest him. Well, what's the charge? Well, tell him I'll think of something. I'll see him in the morning. So I was arrested, told they would think of something, and realized I've got this recorder around my neck rolling. All this is recorded. They put me in a car, and then a friend shows up, and I say, hey, can you give this stuff to my friend over there, because I don't want it to get stolen or lost if you take me to jail. So they didn't realize that they gave him the recorder, so it was preserved. I was taken to jail, and then they said, well, where's your dog? Because I told them she was shot in the back, and they said they couldn't find her. So they're on my property without a warrant, and I know what they're doing. They're trying to find my dog to hide her. The officer says, well, give him back his stuff, unhandcuff him. I said, what, am I under arrest or not under arrest? He said, well, no, you're kind of not under arrest. They took me back to my property, wanted me to sign an open-ended release allowing them to search, and I limited it to just where I had placed my dog, Brandy, and we went down looking. It's dark now. They've got flashlights. I went straight to where I had laid her. She's not there. And
Mike,
then an officer that shows up a few minutes later.
Mike, hold the thought. Hold the thought. We're going into a break. Class, we're back. USAPrepares.com. And Mike Parsons with us. Mike, stand by for just a minute. Carrie in Missouri, you're on with me, Vin Finelli, and Mike Parsons, USAPrepares.com.
Good morning, Vince and Mike. How are you this morning?
Hey, good morning. Carrie, I believe we met.
We did. We met in Harrisonville, Missouri on the overpasses for Obama's impeachment rally.
Yeah, tell us what you guys were up to.
So Overpasses is a grassroots organization, and we're really made up of all Americans, any American who would like to stand with us against our tyrannical government. It's a nonpartisan group. We do not promote any kind of racism. It's not religious. It's no sex oriented. It's really just for any American who's out there who is upset over what Obama is doing to our government, and we're calling for his impeachment. Our main point really is to drive home what's happened in Benghazi. We really feel like there has been a cover-up there, and we are in support of what the National Black Republican Association has done, which is based out of Sarasota, Florida, and they have filed articles of impeachment against President Barack Obama. And the reason for that, one of their reasons citing that, is they believe that there was a cover-up and a delay, and they believe that there's been impeding and obstructing of the investigation in Benghazi. So specifically, including failure to adequately secure the U.S. consulate and the CIA annex in Benghazi, failing to send a response team to rescue those embattled U.S. citizens in Benghazi, lying to the American people about why the U.S. consulate and the CIA annex were attacked to begin with, as well as hiding from the media and congressional investigators with the CIA, the personnel, and other wounded U.S. citizens who were actually on the ground in Benghazi and witnessed what happened. And they've scattered them throughout the United States, forcing them to adopt new identities, forcing them to polygraph tests on a weekly basis, and it's just an atrocity what's happening. As well as I just got information via Fox News that the Secretary of State, John Kerry, has actually determined that the 4 State Department officials who were placed on administrative leave by Hillary Clinton after the terrorist attack, they've all been released to go back to their jobs this morning. So that's some breaking news we didn't know about.
Well, when I met you, you and some others were on this bridge, and you were behind this white line, which is where all the debris is swept off the road, so that you were not impeding any traffic. And you had a sign, a big banner that said "Impeach Obama," and you encouraged people to honk. And I just did a quick survey when I was on the bridge with you, or the overpass, and I noticed that about 40 to 60% of those traveling toward you were honking. Now, I think that another 40% or so were not able to react quickly enough to honk, and they probably would have. And I believe about 10% probably would not have honked. They would have been against what you were trying to do. Would you agree with that, or do you think my numbers are wrong?
I would agree with you. I spent 6 hours on that bridge that day, and I would say your numbers are very accurate. In fact, there were people that have contacted me via Facebook who saw us on the overpass and said, hey, we didn't know you were out there, and we plan on joining you. Mm-hmm. Right now, we're looking at about 40,000 or so that have joined the movement. Obviously, we're looking to grow that number. It is a nationwide event, so every single state has an events page, so you can actually get on overpasses.org, or you can also just Facebook Overpasses for Obama's impeachment and look for your specific state. You can join that group and then go under the events tab, and you will see it broken down into your local area.
Carrie, you sound like instructor material to me. I'd like to request that you send me an email to Vincent@usaprepares.com. We'll contact you. Make sure I have your phone number, and let's talk about this for an hour on the air on this broadcast. Carrie, thanks so much for...
I look forward to it.
Hey, thank you so much for being with us. So, class, we've just included to the faculty overpasses.org. So another 40,000 members of overpasses.org will be learning about Mike Parsons and what happened when Mike Parsons' neighbor killed his dog, and then another dog. Mike, are we talking about a total of 2 of your dogs were killed by your neighbor?
Yeah, there were 2 by one neighbor and then 1 by this last person I was referring to that was a friend of the guy I ran against for county executive, so 3 in total.
Okay.
And then 1, my alpha male, who disappeared, and we don't know what happened to him. But these are animals that would not run away or stray very far from their pack.
Well, Mike, I'll tell you that I know just a little hint of what you're going through. One of our neighbors shot and killed one of our dogs, too. And you know what? I don't look at that neighbor in the same way, and I'll tell you, he won't admit it. I know he did it. But I'll tell you what, as things get worse, I am not inclined to help this guy. So I tell you,
any person that will kill another man's dog is possibly capable of killing that man or his family. So never turn your back on that person. This is a sociopath of the worst kind. Jeffrey Dahmer and all of that type of ilk earned their stripes and learned their craft by torturing and killing small animals as they were growing up. And anybody that would shoot another person's dog, and this person that shot at me and my wife and our dog and killed Brandy, has a history of shooting other people's dogs, and the county does nothing about it. Now, I was arrested, but they did not find my dog. The officer who stumbled across her was told to hush up, and then another officer said, "Oh, it's a possum." So in this case, Brandy, who was an 85-pound wolf hybrid who was about 7 foot long, she was confused with being a possum, a 20-pound small varmint. I don't think so. And when I said, well, let me go over there and take a look, they immediately called off the search and took me to jail. I was charged with theft of property over $100, the rifle that I confiscated that I gave to the deputies, burglary of a vehicle because I reached in the back of the truck to confiscate this rifle that was used to shoot at me and my wife and my dog, and aggravated assault because I displayed a handgun because I had a handgun exposed, which I have a permit to carry. Now, this other fellow was charged with nothing. The night of the event, on his own statement, sworn statement to the officer, he said, he shot at my dog. He killed my dog. He witnessed Parsons saying, stop shooting, you're under citizen's arrest. He witnessed Parsons confiscate the rifle and leave with his dog, period. Fast forward 5 days, they said, in an altered report, Parsons put a gun to our head, said, get on your knees. I could see the spirals of the barrel of the gun. I was afraid for my life. None of that happened. Wow. The audio recording clearly indicates I never said get on your knees, and I was never within 30 feet of the guys based on the evidence, the recording, and a statement from a sound engineer who analyzed the audio and confirmed, yeah, there's no way this guy was within 25 feet, let alone 2 feet. I was charged, and then I went to the grand jury. I'm still trying to work within the system. I went to the grand jury to present evidence against this man who attacked me and my family, the officers who lied on an official document, and the entire sham of the system that we had in Tipton County. While I'm in there, I didn't know it until later. I was informed by the district public defender, whose assistant was in the break room at the court, overheard the Attorney General, Mike Donovan, who was the Attorney General who prosecuted Mary Winkler. Most of you don't know, Mary Winkler is the woman who shot and killed her husband, who was a preacher sleeping in bed. Turns out she was related to the judge in her case, and Steve Faris, her attorney. She's also related to him, little inside information that was never disclosed. But be that as it may, this is the prosecutor that's prosecuting me, and according to the district public defender, this prosecutor and his assistant go back in this room and conspire to charge me now with aggravated kidnapping because I was in the jury pool room trying to get these people indicted. They're going to show me how I can be treated. So they got the grand jury to re-indict me on aggravated kidnapping charges because they claimed that I substantially deprived these men of their liberty. I'm stopping a criminal from killing my family, and I am substantially depriving him of his liberty to kill me and my family. So that's what they did, and I was denied legal counsel. I was issued a Social Security attorney who was a friend of the judge, and as Dr. Shealy said, he would never trust any doctor doing a psych evaluation because they're fraud. They did a psych evaluation on me. They arrested me and forced me to go. And in this document, this person said that I was the worst case he'd ever seen in 30 years. He said that I gave short answers, 1- and 2-word answers. Folks, does anybody listening to me today believe I can give 1- and 2-word answers? No.
Mike,
Yeah.
I can tell you, Mike, I can tell you that we talk on the air, on the phone, in person. It's impossible.
I've got a friend
It's
that I used to go
impossible.
to church with who's an actual psychologist who's not a thug. And I spoke to him about this. He said, Mike, you're the most sane man I've ever met because you see things as they are.
Yeah.
But yet, of course, this is how they silence you. They first force you to having legal representation as opposed to giving you legal counsel, is what the Constitution provides for. They want to put you in equity court and give you legal representation to shut you up so they can create the narrative and lose your case. That's how they railroad people into prison. 2 weeks before the trial, she withdrew because she did not agree with a self-defense. She didn't agree with citizen's arrest. She didn't believe that a citizen should have a right to own a gun. Only police and firemen, or not firemen, police and military should have firearms. She's a socialist, and she's representing a person. She's never had any experience in criminal cases like this. She does Social Security cases and child support. But yet that's what I was provided. Then I was forced to stand trial. The judge refused to recuse himself, given the fact I had an outstanding federal lawsuit against the judge at the time for locking me up under false pretenses. I had a federal lawsuit at the time against the DA for conspiring to falsely charge me as malicious prosecution. They would not recuse himself. I was denied a change of venue. I was given a jury. The jury pool is 25 citizens that come straight off the election rolls. Guess who selects the jury pool that I get to choose from? You guessed it, the manager of the Election Commission office, the appointee of the county executive that I was suing for the election. The guy who, other than being a county executive, an elected official for 20 years, his only experience was he'd been a used car salesman for a few years prior to that. This was their tool. This was their go-to guy to do whatever they wanted, and they wanted to keep him there. And so they rallied the troops, and they railroaded and sent to prison an innocent man who had done nothing other than try to stop a guy from killing his family. And this is what they do to people. This is what happens when you engage the system. So I have too many people that I've spoken to, family members, and they've been chilled. They don't want to go to the media. When I was incarcerated, they would not speak to the media. They were afraid that they would come and get them. I was denied legal counsel. I was denied every means to a fair trial. I had asked the jurors during voir dire, are any of you related to anybody in government in Tipton County? No one raised their hand or said a word. I said, nobody gets a paycheck from this. Okay. Is anybody related to anybody involved in the case? The arresting officer? I currently had a lawsuit against, the only outcome I can see, I can't get them to be prosecuted, so I've got to sue them. That's the only way I can hold them accountable. Juror number 7, sitting front and center, is the mother-in-law of the arresting officer who I've got a lawsuit against. She knows I'm suing him. Juror number 5 is the coach of the local high school football team. His paycheck says Tipton County government. I can go on down the list, but I don't need to. The point is I was not given a fair and impartial jury. The state law recognizes that you cannot send a person to prison unless they were given legal counsel at trial. Argersinger versus Hamlin in Florida, Supreme Court ruling, the Maxwell case in Tennessee, the list goes on and on and on. They sent me to prison, even though I was denied. I was convicted of aggravated assault, theft of property, of the rifle that I confiscated, and burglary of a vehicle because I reached in the back of a truck to take it out to give to the cops so the guy couldn't reload and shoot at me and my family. The local media will not touch this. This is the first time this has been spoken about on the radio anywhere, and this happened in September of 2007. It is now August 20th, 2013. they will go to no lengths to silence me. The animal control officer who threatened to cut off all of my animals' heads, the day after I got out of prison, April of 2012, I was there for 2.5 years, this guy came on my property after I had gone to a parole officer meeting under false pretense, claiming that he got a complaint that I had a lot of dogs. There's no crime against how many dogs you have, but yet they used that as a pretense. He didn't find anything, so he went away. But they use extortion and means of trying to manipulate people with laws that don't exist. I was actually granted parole after 10 months in the prison. The parole officers said, this guy shouldn't even be here. This guy's a model citizen. He doesn't belong here. And the parole board granted me parole, but they put it off for 4 months simply because the DA said I was the most dangerous man he had ever met. Why? Because I speak the truth, and that's a threat to their existence. Then, just before I was to be released after 10 months, an officer in the prison accused me of thinking of violating a policy, and they took away my parole because they accused me of thinking of violating a policy. And at the hearing, I asked, well, what did I do? Well, nothing. Well, did anybody say I did anything? No. Well, what evidence did you have? Well, I thought you were thinking of violating a policy, which there's no policy that says they can charge you with violating thought crime or thinking. But yet, that forced me to stay in prison another 1.5 years, 1 and 8 months. And so any time they want to keep you in prison, they can falsely accuse you and keep you there and keep you there and keep you there. They accused me of refusing to go to work for a job I didn't even have. Convicted in the prison. They'll keep you there as long as they want. There are people serving life sentences in prison who were originally convicted on minimal charges, but they keep on and on and on, and people don't know about it. And
Mike Parsons, hold the Class, I mentioned that USAPrepares.com is venturing out into greater depth of what we discuss. We're going to go deeper into learning more and more rather than just staying on the surface and overviews. And we're going to get deeper than just preparedness topics. And as you know, this is one of them. I'd like to ask you to consider doing this for us. I'd like to ask you to put this broadcast, these 2 hours, this hour and the previous hour of today's broadcast on YouTube, Hulu, and whatever other sources you can find that make sense to get this information out about the corruption and what happens when you run for office and when you run against the machine, so that others can be prepared and make sure that it doesn't happen to them. Mike Parsons has described that he spent 30 months in prison with trumped-up charges, absolute bogus charges. He should have never been there. So please share this broadcast, the links to this broadcast, with all your friends, their families, and let's get it out as far and wide as we can. YouTube, Hulu, and all the other media outlets that you can think of. Now, the podcasts are free at Genesis Communications Network. So if you go to USAPrepares.com, USAPREPARES.com, you'll see the link to listen to Vincent. It's free. You can listen on your smartphone. You can listen on the internet. And we're on 4 radio stations and 2 satellites. Please share the information. And if you decide to do that, would you send me an email? You can contact me through the website, usaprepares.com, and let me know what you've done so I can highlight it and help you get it out even farther. Mike Parsons, what's happened to you is absolute crime. I really am sorry for what they've done to you. I'm proud to be your friend. I'm proud to stand at your side.
Well, thank you you. I just want everybody to realize this is what happens when governments become tyrannical. Society suffers and people suffer, and you have to take a stand. Everyone has an accounting, and realize when you step out into that arena, they're coming after you to the degree that I even went to the FBI and the U.S. Attorney in my area with the audio recording from the District Public Defender explaining to me, stating that the Attorney General in my county was conspiring to falsely charge me. They refused to take the recording. They refused to do anything about it. This is systemic problems, folks. We have to come together, because unless we pop the engine or pop the hood and pull the engine out of this corrupt system and change the engine, our alternatives are limited. And I always look for peaceful solutions. But there comes a point in time where after a long train of abuses, we have to, as our founders, take responsibility. And amongst the powers of the universe and such as it says, we have to step in line with what's right and stop that which is wrong. As the Tennessee Constitution says, we can alter or abolish this government by any means we see fit. That's all right. Right now, I'm still in the appellate process trying to go through the federal courts because the state of Tennessee has ignored their own laws, ignored their own precedences, and has ignored me because they don't want people to hear this story. You've now heard it. It's up to you to choose which path you'll take. If you'll stand in the gap and fight. Now, if you go to my website, disregard the PayPal nonsense. That's something a friend put on the day after I was sentenced to 7 years because they thought people might be able to help my wife financially. That's irrelevant. I'm taking that down as soon as I can. But if you're some legal scholar that is a constitutionalist that has any interest at all and perhaps assisting in suggestions on how to pursue this in the federal court, I'm looking for suggestions.
Mike Parsons, I'll tell you what, any constitutional legal help, if you'd like to contact Mike Parsons, MikeParsons.org, or USAPrepares.com, contact me and I'll make sure Mike Parsons gets the information. Mike, absolutely riveting broadcast. The truth is really painful. Class, your government is out of control at the local, state, and federal levels. Above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next? It's up to you.